Today's webinar is about implementing effective daily meetings. Presenting the session today is Ross Kennedy. Ross is the President and Founder of CTPM, the Centre for Australasian TPM Lean and CI. He is recognised as Australia's leading authority on total productive maintenance and operational excellence through TPM and Lean methodology. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I'll now pass you over to Ross to get started.
Good morning, everyone, and to our webinar. I'm just finding my screen here, sorry. Right, we're in action. Thank you very much. Great to have you all come along to our webinar, and looking forward to sharing with you today about implementing effective daily meetings. We've identified 6 areas we want to try to cover today, and hopefully you'll find the 6 points that we've listed as helpful. I thought I'd just start off by putting this into context as to where effective daily into the bigger picture of TPM and Lean and continuous improvement. And we use a slide called the 3 critical parts of a continuous improvement strategy to highlight, I guess, the things we have to think of when we're going down the continuous improvement journey. Now, the area that you can see, there's 3 areas that need to be focused on, and the area today fits into the first one, reactive improvement. It's about how do we run effective daily review meetings so that we can focus on running the business, and most importantly, when we do not achieve our expectation or target, to work at getting or finding ways to get us back to that target very quickly, but most importantly, stopping it from happening again. So that's where this fits into the bigger picture. And I guess if we're starting to look at getting into effective daily meetings, probably the other point to make is that why is this so important? Well, too often we see companies dive into continuous improvement with their value stream mapping and 5S and other improvement activities, and they don't get the running of the business right. And then people get distracted, and they're continually chasing up things that keep happening. And as a consequence, the journey to world-class or operational excellence tends to get delayed, deferred, or stagnates. So this is why we see getting the basics right is really important. So first thing we need to do is to determine the purpose of each daily review meeting. So what we've identified seven things that we need to look at. First one is review previous day of operations by area or line and allocate actions if required. So in other words, we try to pick up on issues where we haven't achieved our target for the day. So it's looking at the previous day, and it's almost by exception that, hey, everything was good except for, okay, now let's dive in and look at that. Secondly, confirm any changes to the production or work plan that's going to impact either today or the next day or so that is relevant to us. Review our action board. When we do have a miss on achieving our target, there should be an action to stop it from happening again. Therefore, we need to monitor those actions and make sure they are being completed, etc. And then in some cases, people will introduce what we call frontline problem solving, root cause analysis. Now, root cause analysis is very important, and often we drive it by triggers. In other words, if we have a trigger of 5% scrap on a shift, so if we have if we go past the trigger, we would then say, right, we really need to do a root cause analysis on that. There's obviously policies and triggers involved in that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But obviously we want to review where we're up to if we are doing root cause analysis. We have a parking lot or escalation board. What I mean by that is sometimes issues come up or raised that are outside the boundaries of a meeting. Therefore, they should be captured, put on the parking lot, and then escalated up to the higher level meeting that can handle that issue for you, and then feedback on what's happening about it. Communications update might be that feedback from what's been happening from issues you have escalated, or it could be that we're having visitors coming to the site or some other event happening. And the final one is what we call a round table of other issues. In other words, is there anything of concern in the very near future that should be raised by the people attending the meeting? So they're the broad reasons for the purpose of having a daily review meeting. The next one is the importance of planning daily review meetings across the site, because most sites have more than one daily review meeting because they have more than one area. And if we think about the structure of a site, we have different layers in our organizations. Now, the structure I've used here as a demonstration is where you have your frontline people, the people doing the work, and typically they would be led by a frontline leader who's a wages type person. Some people used to call them leading hands, team leaders, etc. And they would have crews of, we would recommend 3 to 7 people if you're in a best practice environment, so the frontline leader can actually develop their people and teach them things like problem solving. You then go up the level and you normally have then your typical supervisor. Now, we've worked with some large companies over the years, and one big multinational had an interesting scenario where they had expanded and acquired different businesses, and they found that people had different titles for different, what were basically a staff supervisor's role. They'd be called team leaders, coordinators, and a lot of other things. So what they used was this generic terminology of a level 1 salary person was the first level of salary, then you have a level 2 and a level 3. So that's where that language has come from, to keep it generic for most sites. So we have our structure. So at different levels, you'd want to have daily review meetings. So on your right now are examples of the types of daily review meetings you might have and when you'd have them. So often companies will have starter shift meetings where the crew get together for 10 minutes with the frontline leader before they start their shift. Then sometimes after everything is going, the supervisor or level 1 salary person would have the frontline leaders come and they'd have their daily review meeting. And then sometime after that, the supervisor would head off to, say, the managers and go to the manager's daily review meeting. And then the manager, production manager, may, if it's a large site, go off to the operations manager's meeting. So we can have different levels of meetings. They're all very, very important. They should all have roughly the same purpose that we talked about. Now, the other thing is, you'll notice I've put on here level O for the starter shift one, for example. Down here, I've said, well, some people call it starter shift, some people call it level O to match into this method. Some people call it a tier 1 meeting. So some people like to call their meetings tiers 1, 2, 3, 4. Some like to give them the names of starter shift, level 1, 2, 3. It doesn't really matter what you call them. The main thing is, if you're part of a multi-site operation company, you might want to get consensus that you'll use the same language and can go forward with whatever language you decide on. The next questions to be mindful of is that the development process of, as we're developing effective daily review meetings, ideally the development should start at the top and work the way down. In other words, the site manager, for example, in this case, should establish the meeting and set the standard of how the meeting should run, so the managers can learn this is the standard expected at the site. Then the managers can establish their daily review meetings with their supervisors, for example, and set the standard of how the meeting should be run. Then the supervisors can learn from the managers meeting and go down and set up their level 1 salary meetings with their frontline leaders and have a standard to follow. So we always try to develop down the path rather than rush in. I've seen some companies where they just go and get all these starter shift meetings going everywhere, and it's wonderful, but there's no real good standard or example established. So the next question is where to start. Well, this is an example of a plan that was put together at one of the clients we work with, and I'll use as an example later on, is actually, I think, Scott Safety. The idea here is we mapped out and said, right, they have 4 production areas, so therefore, sorry, 5 production areas. So each production area needs to have a starter shift meeting. Then you have 2 supervisor levels on the production side. So they need to have a meeting with their frontline leaders. You had then the site or operations manager, who would then have to have the other supervisors come along. Now, we've got in there support people, because you'll see at the frontline level, you've got S1, which is in their case maintenance support. So you had a couple of maintenance people, and they would go off, one would go to each of the supervisors' meetings. You then have a quality support group, you have a planning support group. So most companies have support groups. They have to have their meetings, ideally have them at a different time to when you have your main production meetings, because you want them to come along and support. So it's really a bit of a juggling act to work out how you can run all these meetings so the support people can run their meetings, as well as the operations or production people can run their meetings, and then they can give support to the appropriate meetings. So the idea is to map it all out, then ask the question, where do we start? Now, as I mentioned earlier, development, from a development perspective, ideally you start at the top and get that meeting working really well to the agreed site standard, then come down a level. What we find is happening in a lot of the sites we've been working with is that we've been going more into the middle and starting there. So we start at the supervisor level or the manager level, depending on the size of the site. And then once we've got that established, what you tend to find is that the people above look at what's been achieved there, and then they modify their meeting, and then we can take it down to the lower levels. So again, it's really thinking through where's the most appropriate point to start. As I said, our experience is often in this case, we started at a D1 level, or the supervisor level at that site. So next is the attributes of an effective daily review meeting. In other words, what are the things we have to make sure, the checklist to make sure we have things in place. So before we do that, I just thought I'd just shove in a little bit about what we find when we visit a lot of sites. I've been visiting and sites for 20 years, and I've been attending daily review meetings for probably 20 years at different sites, and I've seen some good ones, and I've seen some pretty, what I call waste of time type ones. And just to get you thinking, I don't know if you've ever attended a daily review meeting where targets have not been met, and all that they get discussed is excuses and the workarounds. Oh, we fixed the pump, yeah, we went and put a new one in, it's all good now. Well, hang on, why did it fail? Type things not being asked. Or the same issue keeps coming up, and you know, you go along every 3 months or every couple of weeks, the same issue tends to get talked about, and waste of time. Or the whole thing just becomes a waste of time, because we're there to tick the box to say we've had it, compliance, yep, everything okay, good, yep, tell the boss we've had our meeting, off we go back to work. So I don't know if you've ever come across those types of meetings, but that's what we're trying to address. We're trying to turn the meeting into something where it is actually meaningful for the people to turn up. So what are the attributes? Obviously, having the right location is absolutely critical. And that location needs both environmentally, as in sound, not too noisy, and secondly, size, so you've got enough room to put an effective information board up. It should be a stand-up environment as people think and respond quicker and more distinctly on their feet. No access to distractions such as coffee facilities or vending machines. You want an agenda with a time frame, not just a list of this is what we're going to talk about, but a very specific agenda should be displayed. And normally we try to display those at least A3 size on a laminated sheet. You want a clock visible so everyone can see the timing, so we make sure we do start on time, and some people will actually put visual controls on the clock to make it quite obvious to everyone. And the most important thing is having a rule that if we're going to have a meeting from say 9 to 9:15, at 9:15, if we haven't finished the meeting, people are allowed to leave, because we're not going to disrupt their day by extending our meeting. So we really have got to get the discipline in as well, and the clock helps to do that. Yeah, so that's what I mean by meeting starts and finishes on time, to allow people to leave after agreed finish time. Then issues are raised but not solved with problem solving conducted outside the meetings, about identifying what needs to be addressed but not sitting around or standing around trying to solve problems. Current performance updated by responsible attendees and displayed using visual prompts. So if you met target, it should be green, for example. If you didn't meet the target, it should be red. And the targets we normally put in black. When we're starting to talk about tier 2 and 3, or the level 1, level 2 supervisor manager meetings, the meetings should be focused on around the areas that you're covering. So typically a supervisor will have a number of frontline leaders from different areas, or the manager will have different supervisors from different areas at the meeting. So the key is that we separate the metric performance based on area, and we conduct the meeting based on areas, rather than, which we've seen in some of the poorer meetings, where people start off and have the group of people, supervisors there, for example, or frontline leaders, and saying, right, anyone have a safety problem? Anyone have a quality problem? Anyone had a delivery problem? And doing it as a group collection of information rather than looking at specific areas, because what we're trying to do is focus on the area leaders and help address their concerns so they can have a good day. The whole purpose of the meeting should be, how do we help our frontline leaders or our area leaders to have a good day? Because they can have a good day, it means the place is running well. So rather than just going out and collecting data on previous performance. So the next one is to determine what information that needs to be reported. Well, from a measurement perspective, from a performance perspective, we've found it really helpful to use what we call the key success factors for operations framework. And what we mean by that is that when we look at what makes a business successful, now the effect is cost financials. Every business is there to get a return on investment. But it's the things that cause that to either be achieved or not be achieved are the things we need to monitor. Costs, for example, are something that are collected and reported typically on a monthly basis. So they are quite ineffective to use anything to do with costs for a daily review meeting. However, what causes a cost to either be achieved or not achieved is what you want to look at. And that's what we mean by the core success key success factors. So things like safety, obviously, if you have an accident, which can be very upsetting for the people concerned, but also that can have an impact on your cost financial performance. Again, quality, not getting it right first time will have an impact on cost financial performance. Not delivering on time or achieving your production plan, having poor plant and equipment performance, having people not turn up, being unproductive, will impact on financial performance. Suppliers letting you down, or in either their quality or delivery, or having the wrong inventory. So they're what we call the key success factors. So they're the things we tend to have on our scoreboard for our daily review meeting. Now, what we typically suggest is that the site leaders get together and determine what the language should be, what are the core key success factors for your business that you want to monitor, and most importantly, what order should they be in, right? Because subconsciously, what happens is that if it's from left to right, people will see the one on the left being more important than the one on the right. If it's from top to bottom, the one on the top is more important than the bottom. And we all know measures dictate behavior. So we've got to get our measures right to get the right behaviors. And then we obviously group our particular measures we're looking at underneath the key success factors. So that's a important thing. So then, again, determining information to be reported. Well, yeah, ask a question. What information does the manager want to know? Right? So, typical manager, you ask that question. The answers we get are, what happened during the previous day that has had an effect on the production or work plan? Right? Have we had any safety issues or concerns? Have we made any scrap or rework? Have we had any breakdowns? Have we had a full crew? Have we got the materials to make our production or work plan today? Right? We've got all the things we need to do our job. Are there any foreseen blockages that may stop the production or work plan being achieved today or tomorrow? And have we found any opportunities to improve? So they're the sort of answers we get from managers. So if we're going to put together a daily review meeting, we've really got to think about how do we blend all this into it. So that leads us on to what sort of information would it be displaying. So just going down the list, obviously safety, obviously quality, obviously customer satisfaction, and internal and external. Plant and equipment, people, unplanned absences, productivity, suppliers, any quality or delivery issues or shortages. And that's where inventory comes in, the shortages. Also, if we think about it from an improvement perspective, reactive improvement, that model I showed you, frontline problem solving, root cause analysis. Are we doing root cause analysis? Are we effective? Are we addressing problems so they don't come back and occur again? Stability. Are we changing our work plan or our production plan? Have we cancelled or deferred events and stopped things from occurring that we had planned? And proactive improvement. Have we got improvement teams? Are they doing work? Are they finding defects on the equipment, etc.? So again, these are the sorts of things that we would want to look at. So we need an information board to support our centre, and our experience has been that an information centre should be evolved, not created by corporate and imposed upon you. Has been our learning at a number of sites. It's better to create your own, and what I find every time we work with clients, as you create one, you keep changing it. You learn and you go, oh, maybe we don't want to measure that anymore, or maybe we should be measuring this. Right? So have it very flexible to start with. Later on, you can then make it nice and fancy and lock it in with a fancy board. But our learning has always been start off simple and flexible. So the things you want, your daily performance scoreboard, by line or by area, right? And your key success factors, what your measures are, and on the right. Then you want your daily performance, and you've also got to monitor your trends. So what we typically use is a daily run chart that goes for a month, and then each month we put a new run chart up. And each measure needs a run chart, so you need a fair bit of space for your run charts. But they are very, very important. Then you may have a planning board on it, whether we are getting anywhere with our planning. You then have, obviously, any reasons as to why you miss. We often link that to the scoreboard, your clock, your agenda for the meeting, your action list of what you're going to be doing, and your parking lot board to escalate issues. Then if you're getting into root cause analysis, and again, what we typically do is get this daily meeting working and just working on actions to stop them from happening again, rather than getting into root cause analysis immediately. Later on, we evolve and bring that in and then you start to have a list of triggers, and you need a board to monitor your root cause analysis, or some people use concern strips. So when you think about it, there's a fair bit of information. So what does this really look like? Well, let's talk about some of the examples, some of the clients we've worked with. This is 3M, Scott Safety. Their board, this is a start of shift meeting board, but you can see in the middle, that's the scoreboard. So they've got their score for their 3 different areas that they're looking at, or in their case, 3 shifts. Their action list, right? They had some more detailed scoring in relation to equipment performance, right? And that related to achievement of production plan type information. Then they had their obviously agenda, their rules for the meeting, and over here their run charts for their performance. So each day after you put the figure on there, you go across and you mark and then join the line. So that's just one example. What we mean by the run chart is a close-up look at a monthly run chart. The other interesting thing is that you do with all your run charts is that you set them up so that good is going up and down is going bad on all your measures, so that anyone can see as you walk past the run charts where the challenges are. As you saw in this one where we've had some issues, you can see very clearly where there are problems, because so good is up, bad is down. There's another example, just some quick examples for you. There's an ELSCO where they used a big wall to start with. Again, playing around with evolving and working out what is it we really want to measure and how much room do we need for our action board, etc. This is a company in Wollongong. Again, similar approach, having a daily review meeting, and again, evolving the board with sheets and blue tack on the wall, laminating the sheets so you can write on them, keeping it very simple to start with so we can start to evolve. Now, this is an interesting one at 3M. We've just recently finished working with them. They had, when we first started, we did a process flow map of the different areas. This is a level, what they call tier 2 meeting, what we would call level 1 supervisor meeting, and you had then different frontline leaders attending and different areas, and they ended up with 4 main areas. And then when they started doing all their run charts, they didn't want too many lines on each run chart, so they ended up looking at this massive need for areas for run charts. So what they did was, being a small section of the plant, they actually created 4 areas that they were looking at, and they walked around and ran their meeting within 15 minutes of walking around the 4 areas and going and looking at, and each frontline leader talking about how their performance had gone in each area. Now, this took a while to evolve. When we first started, everyone was pretty hesitant about the whole process, but this is how they evolved it and became very, very powerful means of running a meeting, and everyone having their wall of their run charts and what they're doing. Now, it's still early days and still got a lot of tidying up to do, but it's not a bad example. So then the next point very quickly is setting the baseline and the targets. What should be the targets we aim for? Well, I'm using the example here of results over 50 days of an average performance, where average performance is, say, 18. So you've got a situation where, if you did this on a run chart, you'd see the run chart. But if I just did it this way to demonstrate, you take 50 days of performance, right? Now, we normally use a month, but 50 days is a good example, and the average is here. Now, in a lot of companies, people go and start setting targets as the best. We want to be the best. We want to break the record. We want to go and strive for being great. What that does is, typically, yes, it's great, you strive for it, but what typically happens is if you go and achieve the record, the next day, everything tends to go to custard because you put so much effort into achieving the record, and your actual distribution curve can actually get wider, not move to the right. What we've found is the whole idea of reactive improvement by stopping incidents events that cause performance to be below the average from happening again, if you start focusing every time we didn't meet the average, one, you're not working with the whole, every event, you're only hitting everything that doesn't meet average, so you're taking the workload off your people, then you stop those things from happening again, and you move the curve to the right, and you end up getting better performance over a period of time. So our learning has been targets can be either absolute, average, best performance, previous performance, or benchmark. We see for reactive improvement, average previous performance is probably the good way to do your targets. Except maybe for safety, you want absolutes. Right? Best previous performance and benchmarking we find is best used for proactive improvement when you're striving for being world class. So difference here between setting targets for reactive as opposed to setting targets for proactive improvement. So our key learning, we've found best to start with average previous performance and focus on stopping any incident or event that stops this from being achieved, from happening again, so as not to overload your people. Targets should be reviewed monthly based on the average of the previous month, and that's why you do monthly run charts. You look at the average of the run chart and say, oh, have we got better? Right? If we are, let's change the target because we're getting better, because we're addressing the things that have stuffed us up. Okay, last point, creating an effective agenda. This is one agenda I saw at a site. Very, very fancy. Yes, doesn't it look wonderful? The trouble is it does not focus on areas. Right? It means we just generally talk about safety, generally talk about quality, generally talk about whatever. So I'm not suggesting that as a good example. Here's a very effective agenda for you that supports frontline leaders. In other words, you have your safety, quality, customer satisfaction, plant and equipment and people, and the way you run the meeting is, in this case, there's 3 frontline leaders at this meeting. So first leader would go up and say, how was their safety, how was their quality, how was their customer satisfaction, how was their plant and equipment, and how was their people issues, and the support staff will be there to help them. So if they've got issues, they can get support. Then the next leader would talk about their issues, then the next leader. Then you move on to the support actions below. So there's an agenda for you that we see is probably very effective. And that agenda should be nice and big up there with timeframes on it so we can see what we're doing. And again, you're working through it, a lot of it by exception. If it's not an issue, move on. But again, focusing on how do we help the area leaders. So going forward, getting your people on board as you enhance your current daily review process. So first of all, have the management team confirm or establish the site's key success factors for operations in the order you want them to be in. Determine the site plan for daily review meetings with timing to ensure support staff are available. Select a pilot daily review meeting, typically level 1 or level 2 or tier 3, 4 meeting, what we'd suggest you start with. Put a team together of the people who attend and get them to go through the process. Now give them a bit of a workshop about what this is all about, what you're trying to achieve, what your purpose is, what your vision, what your goals are, and then get them to meet on a weekly basis. Now once you get things established, and it can take a couple of weeks before things start to get going and you start to kick your meeting off, this is a way of reflecting on how the meetings are gone for the week and what changes and adjustments do we need to make. Make sure you create a high-level process flow map to cover, determine what needs to be measured and what areas need to be measured. I mentioned that earlier. Develop your A3 laminated performance scoreboard and establish an effective agenda and rules. Create an effective information center, including all the run charts required. Educate everyone involved and commence your daily review meetings. Monitor the effectiveness, and then when appropriate, bring in the frontline problem solving. So that's a very quick summary of a pathway. Now, just how can we help you? I've talked about some examples. We've actually written e-news articles about the examples I've spoken about. There's 3 there for you. We'll put a link to these on the email we send out after the webinar. Alternatively, if you want them, they are on our webpage for our members. Alternatively, send us an email and we'll send them to you. But they're a good little read and they give you a bit of background as to what these companies have done and the way they've gone about it. The other way is with that, those teams have used this manual that we've developed, the daily review process, that is available for members, or you can engage us and we can come along and do it for you. I've put in Smart. All those companies you'll read in e-news articles are based in New South Wales. They get funding through Smart and Skilled, which can cover up to sometimes 60 to 90% of the cost of getting someone like ourselves to come in and help them to go through that process if you wish to. Finally, we are a member-based organisation, so I've mentioned membership. If you're not a member, I'd love to have you join, and all these webinars past webinars are on the YouTube for you to look at. Sorry about the timing, bit over today. Apologise for that. The other thing is I base a lot of this on this new book I've just finished writing and it's in the final stages of being published in America. Understand Measuring and Improving Daily Management. That will be out. Last I heard, it's going to be February 15, may even come a bit earlier. They'll be available shortly for people to help you on your journey. With that, I'll any questions?
Okay, thank you very much, Ross. So as Ross said, if you have any questions, just type in your questions in the control panel box and we can give you a quick answer. I know we're a bit over time. And while we're waiting for questions, I'd just like to remind everyone that a recording of the webinar will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel this afternoon, so please feel free to share it with your colleagues. It will also be, the link will also be in the email that will follow up this webinar. Okay, Ross, doesn't seem like we have any questions, so without further ado, if you do have any questions that you think of later on, feel free to contact us at any time. Ross will be happy to answer those. And on behalf of everyone at CTPM, thank you for attending, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.